Okay, welcome back to the course. We're on section 2 now. We're going to dive into audio, video, and some full screen effects in here. And in this first video for this section, we're going to talk about audio mixers and tracks. So this is how Unity now handles audio as of, I believe, somewhere in version 5X, I think they introduced this concept. So let's take a look at what that is. So we're now here in Unity, and I've created a few folders inside of our project, inside of a new scene. So I have this audio folder in Shooty Space. It's got BGM folder, which in our case stands for background music. And I have an SFX folder, which stands for special effects. And both of these have an audio clip each in them, which is some royalty-free music and audio that I found. And then there's this mixers folder, which is empty. Now we're going to go ahead and create an asset inside of here. So I'll right-click, create, and audio mixer. And I'll just call it my mixer. Okay, so there's not a lot going on here, and that's because there's a special window for working with mixers. So let's go ahead and open that up. It's under audio, audio mixer, or you can hit Control 8, probably Command 8 on Mac. I can't remember off the top of my head. It'll create this new window. Let's go ahead and dock that up here so it's easier to work with. And so we have here as a mixer. If you're familiar with audio editing software or like actual physical mixers, you'll have a mixer and then you'll have different tracks. I'll refer to them as tracks sometimes because that's what they're known as elsewhere. But Unity refers to these as groups. So the master group is the default group. All the audio is going to go through this particular group. What I want to do is split this out. So I'm going to create two new groups. One is going to be BGM. And as you might imagine, the other one is called sound effects. Great. So I'm actually going to tab my game window here for now so that I can work with more space. Great. All right. So I've got three different tracks. I have a master track, I have a BGM track, and I have a mixer track. Okay. So let's go back to the scene view for a moment here. And it doesn't really matter where we put stuff, but I want to go over a few concepts. So in Unity, you're going to be able to listen to audio essentially when you have an audio listener. And by default, the camera comes with an audio listener, so we don't have to add it. And then you also have the concept, I created an empty game object here. You have the concept of audio sources. So I have added an audio source to this particular game object. And so you'll notice a few different things here. One is you can add an audio clip and a mixer group. So for us, we want this to play. Let's call this background music manager. Or BGM manager. So BGM manager. And I'm going to go ahead and drop in the audio clip that I want. And then I'm going to drop in a mixer group, which is BGM. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this as play on awake. And I'm going to hit play. So there may be a little bit of audio there. So I'll hit play now and you'll see something happen. Okay, so you notice that while that was playing, the background music was showing the music, sort of the audio levels here. It is also showing on master. So master is basically your main mix. So it's mixing all the different subgroups and they're all coming through the one master group or track. So I've got it here and I can modify my settings for this particular group separately. So if I want to lower the volume or increase the pitch, I can do that here. But before we do that, let me go ahead and then add to our scene a different emitter. So I'll create empty and separate that out and I'll call it SFX. Okay, so I'm going to add an audio source. Great. And then I'm going to add an audio clip, which is going to be our clip in the SFX folder. And then for the mix group, I'm going to add SFX. Great. And of course, you can always go straight to master, but if you're using this system, it's good to sort of separate it. You don't really have to do a lot of heavy lifting inside the code, basically. All right, so I'm leaving it as play on awake. I'm also going to hit loop. Now, before we play this, a way that you can preview your audio is by clicking on the asset and then selecting play here. Okay, so just sort of like a register sound, some sort of bell. Okay, that sounds great. And so let's go ahead and go to the audio mixer. And so now you're going to see that both the SFX track or group and the BGM one are going to have audio. And of course, those are going to feed into master. So let's hit play. Okay, so that's all pretty straightforward, right? All right, so this is the essential overview to the main features of this window. So these audio sources in the scene are essentially allowing you to set the output channel right here and the clip that you want that source to play. And because we have an audio listener on the camera, then it just kind of works out. All right, so a few more things you can do here in the mixer are, let's go there, and then you can add, there's this add button here. And so the things that you can add are these different sort of like filters. And so they do different things. These are the default ones that ship with Unity. And while we won't get into any details about it, you can actually extend this and create your own filters for it. So let's go ahead and add an echo. And I'm actually going to add it to my sound effects. So add an echo. And you'll notice that now I have all these different settings for the echo. So the delay and the decay and how many channels, wet mix, dry mix. Let's go ahead and hit play and see how that sounds. Okay, so now you hear the clink twice because of the delay. I can also set a little bit more of a decay and make this 50 millisecond delay, so it'll go much more like instant. You'll hear it on basically both sounds right on top of one another. So let's hit play. Pretty straightforward, right? And then of course you can stack audio effects here, so you can add another one like a chorus. Now keep in mind that these are going to feed into one another, right? So the order that you put these in kind of matters. And so that's because it's going to go in a linear order. So it's going to start with a chorus, and that to that modified audio, it's going to add an echo. And if you add another like compressor, then it's going to add that on top of it, right? Whereas you could start with a compressor version, then that's going to feed into the chorus and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and just put a bunch of things here. Distortion, and let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, so one of these is basically causing me to not be able to really hear it, so let me remove a couple. Let's hit play. Alright, so if you're running this on your own machine, you'll hear the audio a lot more cleanly and you'll be able to tell the difference. But yeah, so essentially by separating it out into groups, you can have effects that apply to the background music and the sound effects. And of course, you can control the volume and the pitch separately for each one, and those will all feed into master volume. So when you tie into your game menu, for example, you can provide a background music slider for setting that, and the sound effects, and maybe dialogue, and then a master volume, which will control this value here. This is a very helpful way of managing your audio in Unity. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the audio clip settings. So Unity creates audio clips from your audio assets, and they give you a few different settings that you can play with here. And of course, you can modify these. There's a default. There is a standalone, Windows, Linux, and PC. And then there is, for any platforms that you have installed, there's going to be Android, iOS, PS4, etc. Now, a few of the settings you can change here are force to mono, right? If there is more than a channel, 2 channels or more, you can just force this to mono. You can load this in the background, and if you hover over the different flags, it tells you what it does. There's a little tooltip there. The important ones are going to be load type, right? And so essentially, based on what you need, it's going to either cost more in memory or take more time to decompress, right? So compressed in memory is a pretty good option when you need things to be sort of your in-between. Streaming is just going to, right out of disk, it's going to stream it. Or you can just decompress it when you load it the first time. You can preload the audio data, and then there's a compression format. Now, we won't get into the details of what these do, but essentially you'll want to take a look at these per platform and see what works best. And then quality. This is basically a generic sort of like compression. I would not recommend that you use this. I would recommend that you edit your audio for your clips in some external program that is meant to do that. But Unity can do this for you to just kind of give you a rough savings in storage or size or whatever. So if I were to cut this down to like 14%, notice how the original size is 2 megs. The imported size is 1.9. But when I apply this quality setting at 18%, it's going to drastically change that size. So you notice it cut it almost in half. You get diminishing returns basically. You won't be able to go all the way down. And that is because essentially there is some bare minimum data that needs to be stored in there, like some header information. So you'll only be able to go below a certain point, but of course tweak it to your heart's content. And then we won't get into sample rate setting. Definitely recommend that you do a little bit of research based on what your game needs and what your platform supports. And that's it. This little window here, like I said, you can sort of preview. And you can also sort of scrub through it to go to a particular point on the timeline. And you'll notice that here that you have channel 1 and channel 2. That's because it is a stereo clip. And if I were to apply force to mono, and of course I'm setting my quality settings back to 100, you'll notice that now I only have one channel here. So very helpful. If for any reason you need mono audio, that's how you would force a clip to it. But again, try to modify your audio in an external program if you can. So back here to 2 channels, I reset that.